Hey, Steve Harrison here, and with me is Chris Hornick. Chris is the CEO and president of HBSC Strategic Services. He's written the last book of leadership. And so, Chris, anytime somebody can put the last book and they don't have to read the other books, man, right there, that's a huge benefit.
Huge benefit right there. This is the last book of leadership, hopefully, that you need to read. One of the reasons why we called it the last book of leadership really is it creates a unified, holistic model of leadership. And this was something in my career that I had looked for 20 some years, and I wasn't able to find. And so COVID was a great opportunity to read over 100 leadership books and come up with a unified, holistic model.
So now tell me what was not unified? What was not holistic?
Leadership tends to be very context specific. And I think Mark Twain said something that the all generalities are false, including this one. And really what that comes down to is that, when you have leadership principles, they apply in certain instances, but they certainly could be dead wrong in other instances. And so really what the goal of this model was to create a model that took that into account. And so, really just as an example, a leader may seem wise based on how they operate in one environment, but it may be very unwise in another environment. And so you could imagine basically, being at war, there's one way to lead. And then basically, during peacetime, when you're trying to invent a new piece of software, you would lead in a very different manner. And so I've worked in various different contexts, and it's become very apparent to me that sort of based on the context that you're working in, certain principles apply and certain other ones are just really bad ideas if you institute those principles.
So sometimes you're right. Like sometimes you read that great book by that Fortune 500 CEO, and then you go and try to do it in your startup, and it's bad advice. It blows up. It doesn't work for you.
Yeah, and that's actually been totally the case. What is applicable for Google and venture-backed startups a lot of times that are sort of working with one group of people in a research environment may not be applicable for a grocery store outlet, right? So there's all these different contexts, and the same thing like military leadership is very different than leadership at a corporation where everyone's making over $250,000 a year.
Right.
So it's just very different. And so in some cases, the inspiration and the authoritative nature of leadership, it modulates. And so really kind of in having a model that allows you to understand that modulation is very important.
And part of that is now you've identified 10 types, really archetypes of different leaders, correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Everyone from dictators and commanders all the way down to spiritual leaders and martyrs. So that's kind of the continuum. But yeah, there's 10 different leadership types.
And so how many, because I think people are familiar with like personality types. Now you're talking leadership types. It's useful to know that there are 10. Can one person be all 10 if they choose to be at different times, or is that unrealistic?
It's interesting. So, if you're an actor, I guess like if you've taken formal acting training, you probably could modulate across all those 10 different types and do a decent job. I think, really what it comes down to is that most people have 3 leadership types. So they have primary, secondary, and tertiary. And, they can modulate across those 3s. It is rare, maybe someone like, Zelensky or, Ronald Reagan or, some other leader who was actually taking formal acting lessons. They probably could modulate across all 10, but typically most of us, we're, sort of confined to the 3 leadership types that we feel most comfortable. And when we operate in those 3 leadership types, we are authentic leaders.
Yeah, being authentic. That's so important. Now you've had a lot of experience with your company. You've helped a lot of large scale organizations and startups do digital transformation, keep up with technology. That's hard, when you're trying to get a whole group of hundreds or thousands, of people to be able to now know how to use the new software or the new AI, and this poses a real problem for leaders. Like in that context, what's one for leaders that are in that type of situation? Because you've worked with so many people in that situation, whether they're government or companies. What's a big challenge or a big frustration they have?
I always say that really alignment, basically achieving organizational alignment. There's obviously some folks who will resist change. There's some people who are neutral to change, and then there's some people who are driving change. And it really comes down to sort of inspiration, perspiration, and then authority sometimes to basically make these changes. Obviously, if we even talk about something in society like gun control, right? Obviously, every time somebody gets some children's school is shot up by AR-15 weapons, we always talk about that as being like a total tragedy, and it certainly is. I think last year, like 1,600 people, 1,600 children were actually fell victim to those type of circumstances, which is terrible. And just as an example in societal change, obviously sometimes it's inspiration that actually changes society. Sometimes it's perspiration. There's hard work to actually make changes, and then sometimes there's authority. And so even if you look at like something that from a society perspective, you can see that maybe it will take all three in order to change something like that in society.
Mm. So let's say we've got somebody named Bob who's watching this video. Bob's a leader in an organization, and he likes this idea, likes what we're talking about, the last book of leadership. So what's the book going to do for Bob? What's it going to allow him to do if he reads it and he pays attention and implements?
Yeah, I think the goal of this book was really to be a leadership field manual. And so across the 24 elements of leadership, there's case studies, there's principles in this book, which are sort of aligned with this overarching idea of unified leadership. And really having this holistic model allows you to diagnose a lot of the challenges that leaders face. And there's elements in this book that basically are sort of guides to help you think through the various challenges that you'll encounter. So, for example, whether you have an alignment problem or you have some type of, competency gap in yourself that basically you're trying to fill, or, you're trying to create a vision for the next iteration of your organization. Those are things that you really need to have a model in mind that can help you sort of process those things. So, if you're experiencing scalability challenges in your organization, there's models inside the book to help you think through that holistically. And really, this also can be used as a planning tool, an assessment tool that leaders can look at their capabilities today and really develop their own leadership capabilities as well as their team. Because every leader today basically needs to be focused on not only developing their own leadership capabilities, but also working on developing other people in their organization. So that's a critical element of leadership today.
I love how you said field manual, right? Because things are always changing, and this, having to work with so many, technology-based problem solutions and that organizations have and stuff. But it's like, yeah, things are always changing, and it's being able to diagnose what's going on with the organization, with the situation, with yourself internally. So right there, and then determine what to do next. And I like that. The field manual, that's why it's the last book of leadership, because you don't have to just follow Chris's advice, follow the model to go ahead and find the problem, figure out what to do, how to create the right kind of culture, the right kind of response. Boy, a lot of leadership wisdom here in the last book of leadership. Well, thanks for doing this. Where can people get a copy of the last book of leadership? By the time they're watching this, I'm sure the book is going to be out and available. Where should they go for it?
So you can go to www.thelastbookofleadership.com, or it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and wherever you buy books.
All right. Well, Chris, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Steve. Great talking to you.